One of my favorite memory improvement books is not a book at all. It's a workbook. And this is the Memory Workbook by Mark Channon. And amongst those of us who really love memory techniques, like we love them so much, we put mustard on them and eat them. We like this book a lot because it has some exercises that really I haven't seen them anywhere else. So Mark and I, we've known each other for quite some time. He was very kind to come to one of my live events in London, England, many years ago.
Because let's say you prime yourself, you thought, what's interesting about them? But then you meet someone and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've got to do this thing, or I've got so much to do, and then you're gone. So it's about being here, because really the value is about being present, which enables you to listen in a whole different level, much, much deeper.
And we have an opportunity to get together again because he is putting out something called Memory School, which I haven't seen yet, but is very, very exciting in its conceptualization and how he's putting it together. So in today's discussion with Mark, we're going to go through some of the issues around memory, and I think you're going to love the things that he says, especially because we get one of these increasingly less rare situations in which my memory gets clogged up. And there's actually two instances in this particular interview, and I'm just going to let them slide unedited because I think it's really cool to call a spade a spade. And I mean, these happen more when I record these interviews in the evenings, which is the case here because of our time zone differences. But they also reveal to me interesting aspects and elements that I like to confront, particularly because one of the things I'm doing is working very, very slowly on a philosophy of memory, which literally means all these noodly, wonderful words that you can memorize quite easily if you use memory techniques like what's the difference between the ontology of memory and the metaphysics of memory versus the epistemology of memory. And that's essentially what comes up here in a way. And it's one of the reasons why I just keep rolling when things like what happened today, the two issues in particular, happen. And I even asked Mark to coach me a little bit on it. And even though he wouldn't use those words, things like the difference between metaphysics and ontology, they are what I'm thinking about in philosophy. So ontology is essentially the nature of being. At least that's one way you could interpret that. So what does it mean to be a being who has the experience of memory? And then if we think about metaphysics, what's the reality of memory? And those are the things that come out in this interview when I ask him to coach me on some of the situations I'm facing, either when I have to record an interview late at night or just getting old, dealing with more health issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to say that coaching is what it is, and he's very, very good at it, but he's good at it in a particular way, which has to do with maybe adding more friction, which is something a lot of us could use because, as I would frame it, it's getting you to practice a philosophy of memory. So, without further ado, if you like this kind of information from some of the greatest memory masters of our time, hit thumbs up, get subscribed if you're new here, and let's rock and roll with this discussion. Mark, it's 2024. What the heck are we doing still talking about the ancient art of memory?
How long's it been? Good to see you, Anthony.
Good to see you.
I thought you were going to say it's 2024. We've known each other for however many years it is, but yeah.
No, I want to dive right into
memory,
like
2,000 years.
People are emailing me that they like asked a robot about what I have taught, and can I shine some light on that? And it's just, well, I mean, you have been talking about this. There is something about going to robots and talking to robots, but there's also in your recent posts material about you want your mind sharp. You want to be that person who can just access it because you know it, sort of thing. So, to me, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms of paradox, or maybe it isn't, but like, why do we still have memory techniques at this point? Like, why are you still passionate about it and talking about it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you say about these things have been around for 2,000 years, the art of memory strategies, and we've been doing it for a long time. And I think it doesn't matter how much we advance technically, let's say through AI or whatever else comes along, the people that I've talked to 30 people in the last week, like interviewing them, running, these kind of strategy sessions where I'm asking people, what do they do today? What do they do today to keep the mind sharp? What do they do today to learn effectively? And actually, and this is for all ages, this is from 20s up until 60s. And you still hear the same things. I hear the same things I heard 20 years ago. Well, actually 30 years ago, it's gone a while, right? 30 years ago, same thing.
Mm.
You know, people want to keep sharp as they grow old. You know, you speak to people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and they want to keep this thing sharp. And you speak to people when they're younger and they're spinning loads of plates. They've got lots of things going on. They've got domain information they need to get up to speed with. They're changing careers or they're doing the next thing. And there's people are more still overwhelmed, I think, with the amount of information. And I think with technology, how it is, AI, for example, that hasn't minimized information, it's created more. So while it's easier, I think nowadays to, let's say, discover knowledge, it's probably got harder to actually consume that knowledge, embed it in your body so you can actually use it. Because ultimately, we still need to know things so we can go do things and achieve things. You want to learn how to build a business, you got to learn how to go build a business. So you probably got to watch some courses, read some books, and that stuff. It's not going to change. AI won't do that for you. I mean, it can do a lot of the processes now. It can set up a lot of various aspects of the business, but ultimately, I think you still have to know your stuff.
Right.
So short answer is there's more knowledge now, and I think people still need to embed it in memory techniques for those of us who have got past the initial blockers because it can be tough getting going. But once you get to the other side of that, we know how effective it is in terms of just building our knowledge, but then getting that stuff in a body so we can use it. Don't know what your take is on that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, it is, especially when we talk about business. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, right? And it's not like we are at the point where we have a little observation chip or, a Star Trek badge that is watching everything and saying, "Are you sure you're properly insured for that corner?" Or whatever it is in the business thing. Like, you really do have to do your own due diligence, be fully aware, and remember that stuff, because no one is gonna, cry a little tear for you or play the world's smallest violin if you mess up. That's still on you.
Yeah.
There's no AI for that. You were a world memory champion and a grandmaster. Well, you are a grandmaster of
Yeah.
memory.
So I didn't actually win the World Memory Championships. I was a grandmaster. I was ranked third in the world. So that was
Oh,
95.
I thought you won I thought you were the 8th world memory champion. Where did I get that
It's
from?
one of those rumors that go around.
Oh my God. So how
So,
did I ever come to that?
like I say, I think, what happens, it's interesting because I've done a lot of TV shows.
Mm.
And when you walk on to, let's say, be interviewed, they tend to use phrases like that, even though I'd be saying to them, look, one of the world's first grandmasters of memory, I was ranked third in the world as a grandmaster in 95. And I think they just find it easier to shorten it and go, hey, here's a world memory champion. It's like, okay, let me correct you on that. But, so I
Yeah,
think it's
well,
one of those things that maybe got into the zeitgeist a little bit.
this is one of those damaging admissions. Somehow I don't even remember how that I ever came to think that that was the case. But I thought you were the 8th, like you were in the 8th world memory competition.
So 1995 was when I first competed.
Mm.
I'm not too sure how many they'd done before that, actually, but it was actually Tony Bazan approached me because that same year I had this game show on TV. It was Monkhouse's Memory Masters, and it went out to 8 million people. And I've been doing this stuff for maybe a year. And the only reason I ended up competing was because of the game show. And the only reason I did the game show because my agent called me up and said, Mark, you got ideas for a game show? And memory seemed a good idea. But it was never my ambition to go compete. Even when I did, and you got to work for that, right? I trained, it was like three to 5 months window of time I had before I competed. And I was doing like 4 to 6 hours a day because there's no way you can show up to one of those things and not be on your game. And I did pretty well out of it. But I was always much more interested in application.
Mm.
Like, how do you apply it in the real world? Even though I was doing game shows and it was all like, hey, those are these tricks. And I never saw them as tricks. I always saw memory techniques when I started to understand it is a way to use your creativity to make anything more memorable to you so you could use it. So you could get some value from it in the real world. So, but I guess over the years, because I've done a few shows, maybe that's where that comes from, right? So
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, I like these things actually when they happen because they tell me something we already know, like the Elizabeth Loftus is her name, research, where you will
Yeah.
rewire your own
Yeah. The
brain.
reputation, Dr. Evil.
Yeah, but she had the eyewitness testimony research where people
Mm.
like you can take a test subject and say to them, "You had an argument with your boyfriend on the lawn, and the
Hmm.
police were called, and they'll just do all this confabulation, and the person will actually
Yeah.
come not only to believe that that was true, but they'll defend it. They'll
Mm.
fight for it that actually
Yeah.
did happen, even though maybe they had a conversation on the lawn and that would be the only thing that was true about it.
Yeah.
So,
So I've actually done that on a TV show.
oh, okay.
It was called it was called the Hidden Camera Show. Andrew O'Connor it got me in to do that show, and I pretended to be a security guard.
Mm.
However, and we were letting the audience in to see a show with Ainsley Harriott. He was kind of big in the UK over here. He was a chef, and I memorized basically the lives of 5 different people. And these people would come in, and I'd be showing them in, and I suddenly go, Anthony, it's Mark from school. Now, I'm Scottish. They're English. There's 10 years difference. Whatever. It makes no sense. And they go, sorry, and looking confused. And I would say, I sat behind you in maths class. Remember Mrs. Pridham? Oh, when you did that thing and they would start. So basically you take a real memory that exists, i.e. they were at school, you put all these facts in, and then you start to essentially manipulate the situation, and you start to feed in memories. And 4 out of 5 people were like, oh my God, Mark, yes, it's so good to see you again. Crazy. So it's amazing how the memory can be manipulated in that way, how it's so fallible. Yeah, and yeah, like you say, it all came from Elizabeth Loftus, so all that research.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just try to own these things, but I'm noticing as I age. So one of my questions was, and why I was asking about this history with Grandmaster and all that was what you've noticed as you've aged, because I noticed that this is happening to me more and more. David Eagleman is a neuroscientist, and for years I was
Mm.
saying, oh, according to David Eagleman, the brain has enough space for a zettabyte. Now, he does talk about a zettabyte, but what he was actually saying is that it would take a computer that has a size of a zettabyte to track all the activity of the brain. And somehow my mind
Mm.
has completely, like with this idea that I was just talking about your history, it has made that real. And I was
Yeah.
fact checking myself for a book, and I couldn't find for the life of me where he said this about the zettabyte, only this other fact about the zettabyte. Anyway, I'm
Mm.
noticing that this happens to me more and more, and I think I'm still quite good at like verbatim semantic stuff. So, if
Yeah.
it's a line of text, right? Like I can nail it
Yeah.
quite well, but it's these kinds of things that are, well, I guess they have a semantic character to them, but like just when you would have competed, what you would have competed in,
Hmm.
how a person uses a term like zettabyte. As somebody who has had that accomplishment, which is still a big one, and now you're at the age you're at now, right? Which is a little older than me, not too much older, but how has it changed for you, or are you sharper than ever?
This goes. I'm kind of processing this question a little bit, and I'm kind of searching my memories for a
I'm trying to
few.
get you to admit that you also have these mistakes, so I don't feel as bad. No, I'm kidding.
Well, no, well, I actually had a really, really bad situation at one point,
Mm.
and I'll share that with you. And I don't really share it a lot. In fact, I may not have ever shared it like publicly, but I'll share it with you. But it goes back to maybe why I had a reputation for having a bad memory in the first place, because I let people, you do this stuff for a long time and you hear people go, yeah, well, I had the worst memory. No, I really did, or at least people told me this. My memory, in actual fact, was pretty good, but my focus was not. Now, I
Mm.
didn't actually realize this. Even 10 years after doing memory techniques, I didn't actually realize the real problem, which is why I'd miss certain things, or I literally just like zone out or whatever, was more my focus and my attention. And so there was 2 situations. The first situation, I lost out on a massive job. I was an actor, and I went into this audition, and it was for the main part in Charlie's Aunt at Regent's Park. Now, as an actor, this is you know, the lead. I was just playing a lead at the National before that, and it was literally, this could have been my big break. And there's no such thing in acting really as a big break, but you know, it was a good gig. I went into the audition. The director introduced me to the choreographer, and I say to Gillian, "Hey, nice to meet you, Gregory."
Oh, okay.
The Gregory, and I'd worked with her for a year, and I forgot. I literally forgot. But it wasn't I mean, of course I knew I worked with her, right? But it wasn't that. It was the fact that my focus was everywhere, and my stress levels were quite high because I really wanted the gig. And I was usually very, very good in auditions. And so that moment, I realized I need to do work on this, on my focus. And when I started to give that attention, my general memory in life became way better. I became way sharper. So actually, from that moment to this, that is one thing I give a lot of attention to. And because of that, you know, am I as sharp as when I was younger? I don't know. I'm probably a bit delusional in that sense. I still feel really sharp, but I had an incident, and this is the thing that I never really talked about, but it was a number of years ago, and I had a panic attack. I didn't know it was a panic attack. We were watching Harry Potter. I forgot his name. I couldn't get my words together. I thought I was having a stroke. I thought I was having like my heart started going. I thought I was having a heart attack, but I couldn't string a word together. I thought my memory had gone. And I also thought that maybe this is it. I found out later, and I felt a bit foolish about it. But then it came to the point where I realized, like, people have panic attacks, and you know, that's what happens. I managed to get through it. But that moment was pretty scary, because I kind of got this glimpse of what it might be like to not have a memory, to not be able to remember things, to not be able to string your words together. And it was scary as hell. And I guess that is another reason why, since that moment many years ago, I'm like, no, I need to keep this thing in shape. I just turned 53 on Sunday, and, you know, I feel really young here, but 20 years, 30 years from now, I want to be on point. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it maybe gives you a kind of a little insight into my thinking around this stuff and why this is actually important to me, like individually, you know, as well as other people. And I hear other people talk to me, and I work as a coach, right? So people will share a lot. People will share the deepest and darkest when we get into sessions. Not the first one, but as we get to know each other.
Yeah, no, well, that's good. And I think focus and attention are super key. And for me, that's one thing that's changed as I age, because I used to be almost total, I was like modified carnivore diet, but I got into trouble with that. And because I wasn't eating any yogurt and whatnot, I certainly had a much sharper mind, but now I have to eat yogurt, and it definitely gives me brain fog. So I'm not, because of the health problem that caused me to need to do carnivore diet in the first place. And then now the brain fog, which still is a health issue, like chronic pain stuff. My attention's gotten worse for sure. So that's part of it. But to vindicate myself a little bit, we never did get a chance to talk about this. And you know what? I just glanced at it here, and it says on the back that Mark Channon trained and worked as an actor for many years, including at the National Theatre and in the West End before becoming a Grandmaster of Memory at the World Memory Championships. So this itself doesn't say that you were the champion, but it says at the World Memory Championships. So I can see how one's mind puts those two together just on descriptions like this.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I started in 1992, 93, memory techniques. My acting career started in 1990. And I was using the techniques in that book as an actor. I would go, because you get some sides. So you basically get a script, you go into an audition, you got 10, 15 minutes, you got to learn that stuff, you got to go on and you got to nail it. And for me, that was the value of that. If you got a 6-week rehearsal period, you know, people, you kind of build up over time, and you got the words naturally kind of come, and the intentions and meanings, etc. But the game for actors has changed. The reason I wrote that book is Nick Hearn, I think it was Nick Hearn approached me, the publisher of that book, and they wanted to do a series on learning lines. And I've worked with since a lot of actors, because particularly nowadays, the turnaround for learning lines is rapid. And so if you have any kind of, let's say, focus issue, and you've got to learn things quickly, again, that can be an issue. When you're older, I see a lot of older actors, they lose confidence.
Mm.
They were brilliant when they were younger, and they're getting to the 60s, maybe 70s, and bit of brain fog, the lines are coming, it hits their confidence. And once the confidence goes, I mean, you got to build that back up, right? And so I found that there's a lot of actors have written to me afterwards, emailed me and said, look, thanks for this, because this is kind of a bit of a lifesaver for me.
Well, let me say the title out loud for those who are just listening and didn't see me hold it up on screen. Learning Your Lines. And I love this book, by the way. I wish that we had talked about it at the time. Uh, Before I ask you something about it, I'm going to drive myself crazy trying to find a reference to the eighth world memory champion where this happened, because I'm sure that comes from somewhere. But as long as I find that reference written by somebody other than me, then
I know what it is. I know what it is, Anthony. There were 8 Grandmasters that year.
Oh, is that what
so
it is?
it was the first year that we did it. It was 1995. There was 8 Grandmasters, and I came as a Grandmaster 3rd in the world. So
I'm getting pathetic here trying to save my own face, but my point really is that I'm so fascinated with this because I can't imagine I just would have made that number up. But that when it comes to learning your lines, right? And people having confidence and so forth, what is it about acting that is a specific memory task that is similar to memory competitions, similar to professional business settings, and similar to or dissimilar from, just the issues that we're having now? Because I've seen actors clearly catch themselves in mistakes and still keep rolling like it's nothing. I've seen Christopher Walken like doing, I think he was Captain Hook or something, and he's just like a deer in headlights, and then I've seen it all, but like, what is it that's so special about memory and acting where, some actors are so worried about it that they actually have their lines fed to them in earpieces and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that does happen maybe when actors get older and they might have to use an earpiece, because once the confidence goes, you're shot. In my mind, the reason that actors are able to learn a lot of lines, like a Shakespeare or whatever it is, and it can stay for a long time, is more to do with the work, the process that goes on in terms of character development, in terms of breaking down a scene, what's the emotional beats, what's the intention, what's the actions. I will say to actors, listen, if you can't improvise your scene, then you don't know your scene. Like, you get to the point where you can improvise. We can have a conversation. We're going to go in the right direction. We're going to end up on the outcome where we need to end up by the end of that scene. Now, we can do that. There is no fear. Suddenly we take fear away. And if an actor doesn't have fear, well, then they're free. And when they're free, they're in the moment, and then they can react. Learning words on top of that is the easy part. You can sprinkle them on top, you kind of tighten them up. And I think where a lot of actors maybe hit a brick wall or get into trouble is they just try and learn lines. And I don't think it's really fair to say, because I think all actors will have a process, and they will be thinking, they will be in the moment, and they'll have done the work. But sometimes, and it can happen where you go, what's my lines? And it did happen to me. I remember it was a Scrooge. I was understudying Tom Jenkins. It's Dominion Theatre. It's a massive theatre in London. It's one of the big gets in terms of audience size. I was about to walk on, and I'd done my work, but I just blanked. Again, my head was somewhere else. And I turned around. It was Jenny Dale behind me. I remember she was standing there, and I went, Jenny, what's my line? She went, I don't know. I was like, but I knew in that moment, all I could do was improvise my way out of it. So I went, all right, okay. Get into character. I'm here, walked on, did a bit of improvising. 30 seconds in, Anthony Newley staring at me going, what are you doing? I got my line, did the song and dance, and we're all good. So as you get into it. I think acting is actually quite different from a lot of other disciplines, because you do tend to, I think you dig deeper into why you are saying what you're saying, which again makes things more memorable. So it's a discipline that has colored pretty much everything I've done and how I've operated. I think there's a level of playfulness as an actor, which changes your state. And if you're in a playful state, then everything is easier, right? Memory gets better. And so state and belief, in my mind, have a massive thing to do with memory. And for actors as well, what you have is a character. Now, I'm not saying you hide behind a character, but if you embody a character, then I mean, you don't have any fear. This is not about you remembering a line. You
Mm.
can't go wrong here. Your character has a job to do, something they want to achieve. And I think that's what we very different, right? It's different mode than you might get with someone who's just doing a picture or presentation in a business scenario.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I want to avoid too much philosophy, but partly we're always in character. So what is it to then get into character? You know what I mean? Like I'm in character
Mm-hmm.
now and I have to track certain amounts of things, but I'm also not in character. Like I'm free, I think, but
Mm-hmm.
there's still like a sense of a state that I'm in. And so if I'm an actor and I want to do something like, oh, now I can't even do it. But oh, for the brightest. No, I can't even do it, man. I'm like so tired here now. What did I want to do? Oh, well, I'll do a different one. No, I can't even do anything now. I'm trying to do of Peleus, son Achilles, single muse, the vengeance deep and deadly, whence to Greece unnumbered ills arose. But that's coming to my mind when I'm trying to do something else. I'm trying to do Shakespeare and I'm trying to get into my character here, but I can't quite do it. Oh,
Yeah.
for a muse of fire that could ascend the brightest heaven of invention, kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold our swelling scene. I think that's right, but something like that, right?
Yeah.
So when I when I try to blow it, when I try to do that, I always think Derek Jacobi because that's the only actor I've ever seen do that, right? Henry
Yeah.
V. So what am I doing there, or what was I trying to do that I botched, and then maybe I did it, or maybe I didn't get into it? Like just like what do actors do? I'm not an actor, but I think Derek Jacobi when I do that and when it works, it should work.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, one activity you would do as an actor is actually play stuff out in different ways. It makes you less likely to fall off your game if you do something new in the moment. Because if you, and this is why you shouldn't be too strict as an actor, do things the same way all the time, because then you get into this very, very brittle place.
Mm.
In terms of getting to character, for me, that's about doing the work up front, right? You do your work, you understand. And it's different for everyone. I had a process that I use, which a lot of actors will not use as process, right? But for me, I want to know about the background of my character. No one else needs to know that, just for me, right? That would help me connect. I would look for where are, let's say, the emotional centers of a character. Is there a physical center that can help me get physically? I was very physical. So I knew if I could get physically embody a character, I would then most likely move like that character on stage. It may be subtle, not about anything like, it could be very, very subtle, but it would make you move like that character. Now, what that helps you do when, in my mind, you're in character is just listen and react as your character. Now, there's a script, right? So there's always a little part of you which is, you know why you're there. If we're doing a scene, I know why I'm here. Like I know why I'm here today. We're having a chat, we're on a podcast, and there's still an intention. Now that intention might not be totally conscious, but there's an intention when we're having this conversation. And most people we're listening, we're answering questions, etc. But as an actor, you've always, if you're clear on your intention and your objective, then you can let that all go, and then you just want to react. And for me, when you see actors who are completely in the moment, they look completely unpredictable. You think you don't know what you're going to do next, but then you do the right thing. Wow, that's magic. And this is where you see great actors and actresses when they just are, well, magnetic to use your word, like on film or on stage, and you just can't take your eyes off. Like Ian McKellen would be one of those people for me. Just wow, just supreme.
Yeah, well, I legitimately caught myself up there, but if I wanted to actually act someone forgetting, that would be the way to do it, is to literally sort of try to feel the act of getting caught up.
Yeah, or literally get caught up.
Right, okay.
Literally just get caught up. And now you're thinking about something else. What was I thinking about? Or what was I thinking about? Oh, it's gone. So okay. So that's
Right. Okay.
Nothing was happening there other than me just playing out a little, going places in my mind, which, and then you bring yourself back. Oh, there it is. I know what I was going to say.
Yeah, I've done a bit of acting. The most that I've really done acting as such is in magic. So as a magician, there's always somewhere where I'm going, and I tend to have something like a script, not as much of a script as like a real pro magician would have. But what is happening when you're leading yourself to, say, the beat, or the scene, the conditions of the scene, and so forth. I know it's different for everybody, but like specifically on stage, right? Like you have this entire play that's playing out. So it's not like there's going to be a cut and then 3 days later you're doing 5 days previous in the depth of plot. Like, is it that each scene has a kind of memory palace-esque nature to it, or how does it get? How do you turn the engine on in like each and every scene with the entire thing in sight?
Okay, so that's interesting because actually, for me, that all happens in the rehearsal.
Okay.
If I think about using memory palaces as one of the strategies in order to learn your lines, you would break down maybe a sentence, maybe a paragraph. I like to use minimal images necessary, create a memory palace, let's say for a scene, as you said. So you got one memory palace for a scene, but the palace acts as a thinking tool. It allows you to think through what do you want to say. And that's where I would improvise first with the memory palace. And then I would, through rehearsal and actually working with someone, you start to hone the lines. Now, I remember doing a new play, Among the Broken Hearts. This was like 20 years ago now. John Tiffany directed that one. Henry Adam was the writer, and it was a new play. And so lines are changing as you go. So again, you have to be flexible there. But essentially, once you get closer to performance, the idea is that you don't want to be seeing memory palaces on the stage in performance.
Right.
You want to be having the conversation. So I've always seen memory palaces, in fact, probably for most things, not all things, but for most things, as a bridge to accelerate the time it takes to get something into your head. And once it's in your body and you know it, you just know it. And therefore you don't need it. Now, as a backup, if I were to dry on stage, I know if I wanted to, I could bring that thing to life again and get myself back on track. But I shouldn't need that because I've played around with it, seen so many different ways. I could improvise my way out of trouble. So therefore there's no fear. If I don't get a line exactly right, don't worry about it. If someone goes out of turn, it's not just you, right? It's other people. You can work with that. Right? For me, that's exciting. that's the good stuff. It keeps you on your toes 8 shows a week over a year.
Yeah, it sounds intense. I like to more fantasize about it than actually do it, but it sounds like a really wild thing and a great way to keep your head and your mind focused and sharp, and certainly it's an interesting background for you to have. How do you translate that? You've got the Grandmaster background and you've got the acting background. How does that translate to helping people memorize statistics, charts? Like I think in our perspective, we're gonna see, well, mnemonics are mnemonics, and they don't really care what the information is. But from someone who's new to this,
yeah. So I there are kind of 7 key areas that, like, if I'm working with someone, you learn what I would call them the 7 meta strategies. And this is things I've seen over the years. But then there are 7 key applications I've seen as well. And there's more applications, obviously, but one of the biggest for me is like memorizing conversations. So when I coach, I never write notes. I memorize what's been said. That keeps me in the moment. I'm able to interact. Afterwards, I dictate. I actually put it into GPT, and it writes up the notes. Done. Build an expertise. You start a new career. You want to move up in your career. You start a new business or a startup. There are always lots of domain information. So building expertise in your domain allows you to become the go-to person. So there, in terms of how you take the techniques in a business situation, that was absolutely one of them. I think when it comes to stats, data, etc., I was a product person. I'm ex-BBC, I'm ex-Microsoft. I've actually got like 15 years experience in the digital world, leading products that went out to hundreds of millions to 10, or go from 0 to 1. And so that's actually another life for me. I've had like maybe 3 different lives, and that was the 3rd one, and I'm on maybe to the 4th one in my 50s. But when I was at the BBC, for example, I ran a team, and I used to think of it as almost a third party service, and we used to deliver APIs and various features and plugins to iPlayer and radio, and it was during the Olympics of sport and news, etc. And I would make it my job to not just know my stats, but everyone else's. Because what does that give you? If you're in a room and when you're in product, you are negotiating, you are influencing, it gives you a different level of influence, because data levels the playing field. Like, you go, no, these are the numbers. If we tried this experiment, this was the hypothesis, we got this result. So even though you think you might not want to do this, look what the data is telling us. Like, that's influence. So in the real world, memory strategies, like this stuff, that's what it gives you. And I could see the same when I was doing my first startup, and I was kind of raising, and when you're pitching for investment, etc. Again, you've got the numbers in your head. You've got the data, you've got the history, you've got the customer conversations. If you're able to pull out a conversation, go, well, I had one of the customers, this is what they said verbatim, like, that's powerful. We go, oh, okay. Right. And so I think there's the real value in it. And it all comes back to that. You build an expertise. Now, I'm not saying you become the expert in your domain, but you build expertise. And when other people see that, then what happens is they come to you. They will actually come to you for decisions, because now they believe and trust in what you say and what you do. And so I just think, like, in the professional world, if people actually got through the 4, 5, 6 weeks it takes to really get a handle on this stuff, it is, we know it feels a bit, to use a cliche, a bit like a superpower. I know it did when I first did it. It blew my mind. What? I couldn't believe I had this stuff in my head. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's where I see the real value coming up, in how you apply it to certain things. And I've done this myself. I mean, this is pretty much anything that I teach is because I've done it. Mostly I've experienced it, so I can kind of taste it, as it were.
Yeah, well, I asked partly because I know you do a lot of stuff with business people, which I don't. And, it is a superpower. I mean, I look at words, and even at all the years that I'm in this, like, I look at enantiodromia, and I'm like, wow, how the hell am I going to memorize this? Like, it happens every time, not every time, but, it's still like this doubt, oh, that's too hard or whatever. But then I pick it up and I go, okay, so there's an en, and that's duck in German is enten. So enantio, Ant-Man is in there. Like, I wind up getting myself to do it. But I can see, like, other people, they could say, but how does that translate to a graph? And I know that it does, but how exactly I can explain it, I have to think back to the most important graph of the world, the most important graph in the world, I think, from Tony Buzan, because that's how I learned that, is I actually drew it myself, and I learned the words primacy effect and von Restorff effect and blah, blah, blah. And, it's just like, you just do it, you just figure out how to apply it when you're doing it, and you will, like I am doing now. Like, I still remember von Restorff effect from having drawn that graph that Buzan was so in love with, which he had good reason to be in love with. Speaking of Buzan, I see, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this glorious mind map in your background there. Just behind a wonderful silver globe there that looks a little Bond villain-esque, I think, but
yeah, it's for the kids. Yeah, my boys, they come in. My youngest always thinks, he said, Dad, you should get one that opens up, and you got stuff inside there. I was like, okay.
Well, if memory serves, you had talked about mind mapping in one of your books, and quite extensively, really, I think, near the end. And you've got a mind map there. So what is special and still relevant about mind mapping, to just go back to where we started, when we've got bots to do it for us?
Yeah.
Or do we?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a few thoughts popped in my mind there. First, Tony taught me how to mind map. Yeah. So I learned from Tony, and I knew Tony kind of over the years. He was brilliant. And there's a lot of distinctions, I think, in mind maps that people don't realize exist, which is why they hit up some roadblocks with them. But ultimately, for me, if I condense this to a nutshell, that's what mind maps help you to do. Condense your thinking, consolidate your thinking, whatever it is, whether you're using it to recall things, whether you're using it to create things, because essentially those are the two modes. You go in or you go out with the mind map. They allow you to consolidate. And the constraints aren't bad. Constraints make us innovate. So the fact is, on that board, there's a set amount of space. I don't have a never-ending thing, so I have to consolidate. Like, this is not a bad thing. And so I think this is one of the things where people get lost on my map. There's not enough space to get everything in. Well, consolidate your thinking. Hone it down. Do the next iteration, because that means that when you do that, this is a demonstration that you really know what you're talking about. And I use my maps for getting stuff in my head, but also for getting stuff out of my head. And what's interesting with the research that I'm doing right now, and I've talked about 30 people so far, but if you talk to 30 people, that kind of scales up. Most people, what they do to learn, and this is across ages, is they'll still write stuff down, they'll still highlight, they'll still draw notes, they'll still do little, this is how people are kind of getting information into mind. Now, if you combine, let's say, a mind map with the memory palettes, in my mind, memory palettes is a thinking tools. They allow you to think deeper about information. They're not just about, yes, you can memorize 100 facts or whatever. But I think if you were to memorize, let's say, the table of contents of a book, now you have a mental map of the structure of the book. Now you can think about what you read. Now, you don't need 1,000 different pictures. Maybe you need 10. Right. Maybe then you need 5 for each chapter, and then you're done. And that allows you to kind of think things through. If you then take that stuff and mind map it out, now you're consolidating, because now you're pulling that stuff out. You're creating something that allows you to then verbalize it. And it goes back to the, if you can't teach it to 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. And that's, mind maps play a huge part there. I'm a huge fan, obviously, I've been doing this stuff. But whether it's mind maps or visual notes or doodling or, however you want to get stuff out, putting stuff down physically with your hands, it's going to help you remember stuff, but it's also going to help you create things. But I think for me, the main value of my map is the constraint that there is, a set amount of space.
Yeah, well,
huge value.
I quoted Shakespeare there, and he used a lot of constraints, and those iambic pentameter is extraordinarily productive of a lot of not just text, but a lot of meaning that is, able to be quite explosive in many, many fewer words. So that's definitely the constraint factor definitely makes sense to me. So tell me about Memory School, and why are you building it in public, showing the process of putting a thing together? Because it seems like two different things, right? It's kind of like, here I am as a creator of a product, and then this product gives you a particular skill if you wanted it. But I mean, what's the game behind the game, now that I think of
so
behind you there?
22 days ago, as of today, I made this decision, and there wasn't a lot of thought behind it before I did it. I thought, you know what? I'm going to build Memory School in public. Now, if I go back a little bit, why am I doing Memory School? The reason why I'm doing it actually goes right back to the 90s when I did my first business, 1995, the first seminar I ever ran. I used to do these 2-day workshops. Day 1, I teach memory techniques. I show people how to learn. Day 2, all application. So it was activate on day 1. I use activate deliberately because I believe people activate their memory. It's like we've all got this ability, right? And then you apply on day 2. But day 2 was a free-for-all. I had people coming in with all sorts. How can I do this? And I put people in groups so they could self-learn, self-teach based on what they heard the day before. And then I come in and facilitate when people got blocked. I loved that model because it was crazy, because it kept you on your toes. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. And the first one I ever did, I got 2 letters. One was from Beth. She passed with 100%. This acupuncture exam. She was in the corporate world, had left, started her own business. And another letter was from Hermione, who's had this whole new level of confidence. So that's why I started Memory Techniques, but it's also why I'm doing Memory School today. I said to you earlier on, there was a version of it like 20 years ago. But I decided, when was it? Maybe about a month ago, that I wanted to create Memory School. But the reason I wanted to create it was all about application, because I see a lot of stuff out there, and even the books, and I'm probably a culprit of this as well, where, and I tried to talk about application in the books, but you can only ever get so far. And so I really wanted to not just show people how to make this thing work more effectively, but really apply it. And so that's why I'm doing this. So people want to, improve your memory so you can be more effective personally or professionally. And there's probably more professional slant to this, if I'm honest, And you can't really separate these two things, because if you perform personally, you perform better professionally. These things go hand in hand. But that's the reason behind it. That's the why behind it. And what I'm really trying to do here is create a self-learning community, create a memory community that adds real world application and value, so that you can see someone's been on a journey. So anyway, 22 days ago, I thought, you know what, I'll just do this in public. I'll just share what I'm doing. And there's one part of me thinks, okay, maybe this will be a good way to get people interested, and the thing, complete transparency, right? And the other thing is I get to practice what I preach in terms of, I work with a lot of startups. So, all right, I will use the exact same process that I use when I'm coaching startups in terms of customer discovery. Have you got a problem worth solving? Sell before you build, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And so you're right. There's a kind of dual purpose here. Now, I have no idea how it's going to work. I'm on day 22. And I guess the status so far is I've done about 30 interviews. So now I've got a really good idea. Okay. I can see some of what people are using today. Interestingly, a lot of it's analog, to learn. People still write stuff down, right, to get it in their head. And I can also see what they want to achieve. And that allows me to go, is memory school, does it have legs?
Right.
And that idea of building expertise seems to hit home with a lot of people, keeping yourself sharp, particularly with the older people that I'm talking to. And, you got some people who may be shifting careers and they've just got a lot of domain knowledge. And while they are getting by right now, the idea of being able to do this in a way which is less stressful and adds more value and more impact is enticing. So that's where I am with it. I'm doing it all in public, and I'm sharing where I'm failing as well as where it's kind of working. So, it's, and, I started out saying I'll get 10 customers. I don't think I'm going to hit 10 customers by 30 days. And actually, when I got to day 10, my strategy turned more towards giving away 100 free spots. And the reason I want to do this is because I know that with a community, no one wants to pay to go into a community which is empty. It's like walking into a room and you're there on your own. You're the first one at the party. You want to get there when the party's kind of buzzing. And so I made a decision earlier on to go, let's give away 100 free spots for life. People can jump in, and I qualify people by asking them to go fill in a score app. So a little scorecard, it gives you a memory score based on like 6 different aspects of memory. And then for some people, I'll do a one-to-one with them as well. Right. So that's where we are. So we'll see how it plays out. Like, I still have no idea whether it's got legs, whether I can hit that 100 people. I've got 35 spots so far that I've given away. I'm opening the doors at the weekend. So I don't know when you're putting this out, it might already be live by then, right? So, but we'll see.
Well, I don't want to take up one of those seats, but I want in.
Oh, you're right. Hey, yeah, you got a seat.
Okay, cool.
Having someone like you on there just adds more value, right? So,
right. Well, I hope it does. I shouldn't immediately agree, but thank you.
No, it definitely does.
let me ask the tough question, though, or what I think is potentially a tough question. It's one I always have to ask myself anyway. So there's a lot of people now who know a heck of a lot about memory techniques. What do we got that they haven't heard before?
Yeah, I think it comes back to application. People don't know how to apply that stuff. How do I be a better manager in my one-to-one sessions? When I'm in those line management meetings, how can I be more present, remember more of what this person in my team is saying, and be more effective for them? Right, memory techniques can help you do that.
Right.
How can I skill up in this debate? Like, I think that's what we'll do there. I mean, in terms of what's going to be offered, you'll obviously have courses. I've got a bunch of playbooks I'm building out. People need to, know a certain amount of stuff. The community, I'm hoping will self-learn, but I'm just going to be building up case studies. So I want to work with people, so we record their journey from going to X to Y. And I think this is what's going to be really unique. So other people who want to go on that journey can see someone, not me, but someone else. Oh, this is how you go on that journey. So now we create a little roadmap for people, and we get people from different industries. You can start to see, oh God, okay, I see how this stuff works now. For me, that's the biggest gap. I don't know if you see this, but I see it all the time. And this is why most people, I say most people, and I don't think I think it's probably the truth. Even if they start memory techniques, they might memorize a shopping list, but it never really takes hold in their life.
Mm.
And if it did, there'd be a big impact.
Yeah, well, the reason maybe I didn't frame the question correctly or optimally. What I'm thinking more is there are all kinds of people that I encounter all the time who are just waiting for the deeper technique, right? So they'll come to me and because I talk about Giordano Bruno all the time. I put mustard on the Elizabethan era techniques, Robert Flood, all Alexander Dixon, like all these guys, right? And
Yeah.
they're there's more zen in what they're doing, but it's not like the techniques are so super different. It's not like you're going to open this door and then all of a sudden there's a new way of encoding things. So I think that that's kind of the real challenge. I think they do know how to apply the techniques, but it's always like they're just waiting. And it's almost like the real joy or the real pleasure is waiting for the next shiny object when I think you and I know, except for the shadow, maybe like there is no new
Yeah.
shiny object. And even the shadow is still the major, I believe, I think, anyway, as far as I understand it, it's still just like an extension of the major system.
Yeah. I mean, look, I talk about 7 meta strategies, but these are not things that I've created. These are things that have been around in some form, forever. So, priming, for example.
Mm.
So first meta strategy, if you don't know how to prime yourself, then you don't really stand a chance, because if you prime yourself, your brain will unconsciously pay attention to the things that are important to you. You'll have different actions, different behaviors, make different decisions. This is also going to impact your beliefs. So beliefs and priming, like that's massive. That's about confidence. And it's about having your brain do the work for you without you having to do the work. And so for me, that is, I'm mad not on priming. And like, you need to learn to prime yourself. And there's different ways to do that.
Right.
You need to learn to get into that state of flow. You need to learn to not memorize, but connect first. Because when you connect first, when you observe, you don't have any stress. And when you're free from stress, it's easier to learn. And then you can do the memory stuff. When I say memory stuff, I'm talking about chaining and memory passes and creative words and, any other kind of system that allows you to, this is the magic sauce, as it were. But then even beyond that, we know that you still have to use the space practice, right? Space retrieval practice. Otherwise, things ain't going to stick long term. Then you have to find a way to have it show up in your life. There's the value, like for me. So that's that. And then you have to create some habits, because again, even if you want to do that stuff, you might not know how. And so a lot of what I do incorporates behavior design to make it easier for people to get started, gain traction with it. And then once you get value, now you can ramp it up.
So let me ask you this then, coach me if you will, because maybe I'm a rare case, but I think there'll be more people like me than it might seem. I struggled to recall a line of Shakespeare, and this is happening to me more and more often. I was talking with Rook. See, this is, I think maybe I'm getting aphasia, is it? I don't know. I was talking with Luke Ranieri, and I totally blew this line that I know really well in Sanskrit. It's like Turtva, Moharnavam, Hatva, Ragadvesh, Dirakshashan, Yoga, Shanta, Santa, Yuktatma, Ramo, Vrajate. But when I was talking with him, like, it was exactly like that Shakespeare. Like, it's just not coming. Now, that maybe I'm wrong and maybe I've misremembered my past, but I think that just never used to happen to me in this way, that it's just like, like what am I not doing to prime myself when I get on these interviews? Because I used to feel, oh yeah, like it just comes out of the mouth, no problem. And now today we saw it, and it's actually in several different ways, So, coach me
you
on,
asked, sorry.
I was just going to coach me on what I can do as, I don't know what you would call me, intermediate or whatever. I'm not a beginner.
I think you were in the advanced bucket there, I'd say, to be fair. But you asked the question, what am I doing to prime myself? Now, the way you asked the question was, what am I doing to prime myself? If you ask it in a different way, so if I was coaching you, like if I'm coaching right now, I'm going to say, ask that question, but ask it with a different intention. What am I doing to prime myself? What can I do to prime myself? Like if you were to ask that question, what can I do to prime myself that maybe I'm not doing today, then what comes to mind for you?
Well, see, to me, like maybe I have an unrealistic idea of what it means to be a mnemonist, right? But a mnemonist should not have that issue, maybe. And I'm being a bit dramatic,
Huh?
but it's still a standard that I don't think is that crazy to not trip over one's words, to not so much, to not blow lines that you know really, really well, and not look like a deer in headlights. And to be fair, it's 5 p.m. here in Australia, and I've been up since 5 a.m. and I'm getting older and I have a health thing and blah 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 blah. But at the same time, like I would want to be in my 80s and be better than I am today, because I'm starting to slip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, if I was to put a coaching hat on here, like keep my coaching hat on, I dive into the belief. I don't think a mnemonic should, I'm paraphrasing, blow it. They should be able to, a mnemonic should be able to do this, right? Okay, so there's a belief. So that belief is now just created, that's going to result in a set of behaviors. So if you make a mistake and that's your belief, what's going to happen? How are you going to feel literally in that split second? You're going to feel more tension, or are you going to feel relaxed? So it's probably going to dip over this way, right? And this is what I love about coaching, because with coaching, you don't give any answers, right? But what you do is play back what you see, and it allows you to think that through. I wonder what would happen if you had a different belief.
Right. But then if I come up with a different belief, then how do I avoid leading myself just into more punishment? Because then my different belief is like, well, then what I should do before I get on these interviews is, have a nap. But wait a second, I feel really bad after a nap. Like, it's almost just like a new map.
Yeah. So maybe that's not the right belief.
Okay.
And so, but there will be a belief that supports you. And I think that's the question. What is the belief that would support you, but also allows you to continue to increase until your 80s? What is that belief that is unstoppable, that it's going to shift things? And then what is the set of behaviors that go with that belief, no matter how it doesn't feel right? And this is the challenge and stuff we all deal with, because we want to get drawn back to no, but the thing is, the problem is this. And you go, okay, but what you believe is this, which is that supporting the problem, or is it helping to solve it? And only you know. But I think the power of coaching is very different from, let's say, teaching or training, because I can train people. I can go, look, here's a technique, apply it in this way, or here's a belief, and this is how you change a belief. But actually, if we were to dive into 90 minutes of like coaching, different things are going to happen. And as a coach, I also have to offer challenge. I also have to go, Luke, well, you're saying one thing, but I'm hearing you say something else. Underneath, what is that? Can we dig into it? You get it stuff, right? So
yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it gives me food for thought. Well, without giving away too much about memory school, what's one unique thing you can share? I mean, I know you said you didn't invent the techniques as such, but I'm not sure that that's actually true. I think there is something unique that you've brought, but I don't want to. I mean, maybe you got it from somewhere else, but is there something that maybe you can share that might be new to somebody that will go, oh well, I got to check this out. Again, without giving away too much.
well, no, I'd give away is everything really as much as I can, but I think when I bring it back to what is the key thing that actually improves a person's memory, I probably wouldn't talk about the memory techniques in itself. I talk about a memory pulse chain. It always comes back to state in my mind, and it's the idea of being playful. Now, I was a hugely playful kid, as all kids are, right? But then I spent 50 years as an actor, and we just play every day. I mean, it is literally the best gig in the world. I might go back to it at some point, because who doesn't want to play? But here's what happens. When you play, you have no fear. There's no consequence. You don't care if you get it right or get it wrong. You're just playing. That state is so powerful. It's powerful for remembering more, but it's also powerful in terms of being productive. And when you're primed to be playful, you show up in a whole different way. I mean, for me, it is the most energizing thing. Energy comes with it. And it then means when you take a technique, and, memory techniques for me is just creativity. Like, memory is an act of creation. And so when a person stops thinking about memory as, I need to remember this and put things here and there, and they just go, what am I actually doing? You're creating. You've got this canvas in your mind. You're creating stuff. And the more elaborate your creations, or sometimes the more emotional your creations, the more they stick out for you. That's all memory is. And we all know it's fallible, so sometimes we misremember, right? And so I think those two things for me are maybe the way I look at things, that playfulness, which impacts how what you believe in yourself, your levels of confidence, how you show up, and just really is a very meta level, seeing memory techniques as a creative skill. And so even if you think you're not creative, you can learn to be creative in this way. And so I guess those are the two things, playfulness and creativity. I don't know if that's what you had in your head there, but when I think about it right now in this moment, that's what comes to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. And uh, I always try not to be creative with memory techniques, but that's my own thing with the alphabet and all that, just having pre-prepared images. So it goes a little bit faster, but it is creatively applied. So it just gets to be semantics. But
Yeah.
I'm excited and I'm glad I have a seat. So is there a link for people to go to where they can take advantage of what you're doing? I know you're on LinkedIn where I see these things. I don't know where else people can follow, but
Yeah.
where can they learn more about Memory School?
Yeah. So I'm actually building this platform on School. So school.com. So SKOOL.com. So it's Alex Emosi's platform, Sam Ovan's platform. So I'm building it on there. And it's basically school.com/memory school. There you go. And that URL shouldn't change now because obviously it's not kind of live yet, but that should be there. I can give you the link and you can kind of share it if anyone's kind of interested. And we've got this 100 spots. So if people want a free spot, probably jump on that quick because I don't know how long they'll last, but hopefully they'll all go. So yeah, that'll be where people can jump onto.
And that's Memory School, one word?
Memory School, one word.
No dash or anything.
So school.com/memory school. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you more about how you can juggle so many things at the same time, but I know you got to bounce. So, maybe we earmark that for a different time, but you are a person who astonishes me by how much you can do all at once. So how much of that
I could give a little bit on that, actually. I could give a little bit on it because I have one process because I do a lot around productivity as well. It's my like a niche, but I've always found if I have multiple things, like right now, I've got a tech startup that we're building out, which is an AI coach. I think do what I'm doing here with the memory stuff. Yeah, I've obviously got memory school and my coaching business that I do as well. And there's various things there. And I've actually got a production company as well that I've got.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, it's small, and we do like video production for socials and things like that. But actually, I have minimal involvement. I kind of get people in, and we do the thing, and etc. But I find having multiple things, people will tell you, do not do this. Laser focus on one thing, and to a large degree, I agree with that. But actually, what I find is these things energize, and it allows me to keep my energy very, very high. But what I do have is just one list. I actually have two lists. I have what I call an impact list. And these are impact activities that might move one or more of these forward at any one point. So I'm always very clear on what do the next 3 months look like, what I want to achieve. And then I have a to-do list, which is all the other crap. Could be important, could be urgent. I've got to do my accounts, etc. But you know what? It doesn't move the dial. And when I just split my life like this, so it gives insane levels of clarity. Every day I do a priming session. What's the most important thing today? Every week I do the same thing. What's the most important thing this week? Every 3 months I do the same thing. What's the most important thing 3 months? With clarity, less distraction, less mind wandering, higher levels of focus. So that's how I kind of juggle things. But the things that I've got spinning right now, they give me energy. They do me a service. And if I was just to zone in on one thing, I can motivate myself. I could do that and just do, and maybe that moves a bit faster, but I'm kind of okay with that. I think I've got a nice balance. And I always say to people, look, what works for you? What works for me might not work for you, but find the thing that works for you, then go and execute on that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I find I have to do multiple things as well. And I mean, they have to be things that energize me, but at the end of the day, if it's just the same thing over and over again without any variability, it's just chaos. But do you know what it is that's inside of you that allows you to be able to do that focus? Because I think that's the question also is a lot of people know this stuff, but it's getting yourself to do it. And I know you've talked about tiny habits before in the past. Is it still that, or has anything changed in your thinking?
It goes back to my dad and running when I was a kid. I didn't always want to run every day, but I did it. Have you seen the bear the series, The Bear. He runs a restaurant and he gets to take it over. But I've been talking about I talk about non-negotiables a lot. What is non-negotiable in your life? And so this is something that, look, if you want to use a tiny habit to get to these things, you can. But ultimately, there's certain things which are non-negotiable for me. And that has always been the case. Since I was a kid, I started tap dancing at 6 years old. I've tap danced throughout my whole life. I did loads of tap dancing shows in the West End. And when you're a kid, you learn, because I'm doing this every day. I'm running every day. I'm tap dancing every day. On the days that I don't want to do it, I'm going to these classes that sometimes I don't want to go to. Sometimes I do. It was my choice. No one made me do it. But my dad always instilled in me, look, if you want to get good at something, you got to put in the work. You got to practice. And it just stuck. So it's kind of how I'm wired up, as it were. Right. And I think that when I do focus, I get hyper focused. I'm in the zone, And I've learned how to kind of play with that and switch it off and switch it on, etc.
Well, it's infectious, that's for sure. So thank you. It's good to catch up, and glad you're still,
you too, Anthony.
Still doing memory. I think it's the most important thing. And I think, even though I framed my questions as I did with the robots, I think it's more important than ever before. And so I'm really glad that you're still operating in the space.
Great stuff. Pleasure. Love doing this, as always.
Good. Well, I hope to do it again soon. Well, I want to thank Mark again for joining me. It's always a delight to get together with him. And if you don't have the memory workbook, I would highly suggest getting that. And, skedaddle on memory school if you have the opportunity to get in there, because I'm sure it's going to be great. I haven't yet received my login, but I am looking forward to it a great deal. And one thing to consider, no matter where you are in the memory improvement game, is always approach it with beginner's mind. It's not just that you don't know what you don't know. It's just simply that there's a value to coming back to the fundamentals over and over and over again, to constantly attune the mind to actually making sure that you are doing the fundamentals. Because when you're not, then you can actually start to forget what those fundamentals are, and then you make more and more errors, and then you have more and more issues, etc. And so that's a major reason why I keep coming back to the fundamentals, and I keep my library just packed with things like the memory workbook, even if it sometimes leads to little errors, because this book too says that he was a Grandmaster of Memory at the World Memory Championships, which causes the mind to, or at least my mind, it caused my mind to think, oh, well, then he must have won the Memory Championships. But in any case, however these errors come, I think what we always have to do is be humble, and we have to call a spade, and I really appreciate that Mark himself just says, oh, no, that's not correct, and helps that get sorted out. And that we also have to do. We always have to go, and I've seen it so many times. People just say, no, that's absolutely correct because I memorized it XYZ ways. And I think always to myself, well, it's fine to be confident, and it's good to recognize and label the feeling of confidence, but get it checked out anyway, because there's all kinds of errors that can happen. It's about better memory, not flawless memory, because I don't think flawless memory is a thing in humans, and it probably isn't a thing in computers either. I mean, just look at how things get memory hold, edited in real time, etc., etc. So if there's such a thing as flawless memory in the world, I don't know where it is. It certainly isn't in the machines, and it can't be in the human brain either, to the best of my knowledge, except for maybe 1 + 1 = 2. But you get hit on the head with a rock hard enough, that also can be difficult to remember. So with that in mind, if you'd like more interviews that are along these lines of memorizing stuff and how do you really manage it over the long term and set goals and stuff, I'd recommend checking out the interview with Luke Ranieri next, who set his goal to memorize the first 100 lines of the Iliad. I've only memorized a little bit of it, but deer and headlights kind of effect happened in that interview as well. And I don't know why it happens. I keep philosophizing about it, and I'm so glad that I also have good friends like Mark Channon to help with the practical strategies of getting back in the game, but thinking about it realistically. And so thanks again for joining me here, and check out the interview with Luke Ranieri next. And until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic.